The giant ship from the White Star Line Company was launched on October 20, 1910. It and its twin brothers, the transatlantic liners Titanic and Britannic, were competitors to the Lusitania and Mauretania, which belonged to the Cunard Line Company. However, unlike its twin brothers and many competitors, the Olympic had a more fortunate fate. The legendary Titanic sank in the North Atlantic during its maiden voyage, colliding with an iceberg on the night of April 14-15, 1912. The Britannic sank on November 21, 1916, after hitting a German mine in the Aegean Sea, near the Greek island of Key. The Lusitania was torpedoed by a German submarine and sank on May 7, 1915, off the coast of Ireland. The Olympic served for many years, undergoing numerous trials. Only in 1935 was it retired from active service and remained idle alongside its former rival, the Britannic, for 5 months. Externally, the Olympic closely resembled the Titanic, with one distinguishing feature being the open promenade on the boat deck. This was different from the Titanic, where this area was enclosed up to the second funnel. Additionally, the wings of the captain's bridge on the Olympic extended beyond the false deck of the ship. Unlike the Titanic, there were also differences in the sports decks through which passengers in first class ascended onto the ship. On the Olympic, these were round portholes, while on the Titanic, they were rectangular windows. In 1986, when the Titanic wreckage was discovered, a door on the deck was found to have clearly visible rectangular windows. In later years, this door was raised and became an exhibit in a traveling exhibition worldwide, with its rectangular windows. The recovery of this door from the Titanic disproved the conspiracy theory that the Olympic, rather than the Titanic, was at the bottom of the North Atlantic. The Olympic was supposed to be launched in the autumn of 1910, but there were issues in Southampton and New York. To modernize the ports to accommodate giant Olympic-class liners rather than insisting on full payment from the White Star Line Company for such work, agreement was reached during challenging negotiations. On October 20, 1910, the Olympic was launched. To facilitate the launch, 23 tons of oil and soap were used. Then, the liner was placed in a dry dock where it was fitted with propellers. In 1911, the Olympic successfully underwent trials, achieving a speed of 23 knots. On June 15, 1911, the Olympic visited Southampton and then set sail for New York under the command of Captain Edward John Smith. He was considered the most experienced captain of the White Star Line Company. A year later, he would tragically perish on the Titanic. During this voyage, the Olympic had Joseph Ismay, the managing director of the shipping company, on board. A year later, he too would find himself on the Titanic. However, unlike Captain Smith, Joseph managed to survive while on the Olympic. Joseph observed what could be improved, and he noticed that the first-class promenade on the deck was not in demand. He suggested removing it on the Titanic and replacing it with expanded cabins. Furthermore, during the voyage, he observed that the open part of the promenade on the deck would become flooded during bad weather. This is why Joseph proposed glassing in the front part of the promenade on the Titanic, which was subsequently done. The first incident involving the Olympic occurred in the port of New York when a harbor tug was pulled beneath the giant ship, causing significant damage to its stern. On the Olympic, only scratches were left. Another incident occurred on February 24, 1912, 700 miles off Newfoundland. The crew felt strong vibrations in the propeller shaft, and passengers later recalled that the Olympic was shaking violently, giving the sensation of being on a train taking a sharp turn. Upon arrival in port, it was discovered that the liner had lost one blade on its left propeller. The blade was replaced, and the Olympic continued its service. The cause of the incident was never definitively determined, and there were speculations that the ship might have struck a submerged object or that the blade attachments had been severely weakened and couldn't withstand the stress. 6 months before this incident, the Olympic had a collision with the cruiser Mishawk near the Isle of Wight. The crew was familiar with the waters, but they took all precautions. Several officers took positions as lookouts on the ship's bow, stern, and crow's nest. The ship was being helmed by a quartermaster, and it turned southwest. The officers noticed the cruiser Hawk, which was heading towards Spithead and its anchor station in the Solent, between the Isle of Wight and the Hampshire coast. 3 minutes later, the Olympic began to turn to port while sounding 2 short signals. Its speed started to increase. The cruiser Hawk caught up with the ocean liner, and for a brief time, they sailed alongside each other. Then, the cruiser abruptly veered to port and, at full speed, its bow collided with the side of the giant liner. The impact on the Olympic was quite strong, and many passengers felt a slight jolt. The crew of the Olympic discovered a 14-meter-long, approximately 45 feet gash on its starboard side, and 2 compartments were damaged. However, this breach did not pose any serious threat to the liner. Captain Edward John Smith ordered the passengers to be transferred to another ship and then sent the Olympic for repairs. The cruiser, Miss Hawk, suffered serious damage, with its bow being twisted and part of its hull plating torn off. However, the ship miraculously survived this deformation and was able to make it to port for repairs. The White Star Line Company filed charges against the Royal Navy, alleging that the cruiser had intentionally rammed the Olympic. In response, counter-charges were filed, condemning the captain of the Olympic, specifically for violating the rules of the road at sea. Ultimately, the White Star Line Company was found guilty, and the Olympic's captain was exonerated of wrongdoing. It was suggested that the collision was caused by ships being drawn together, a phenomenon now known as the hydrodynamic interaction of vessels. In such a situation, when ships are traveling parallel to each other, a specific distribution of zones of increased and decreased water pressure is created along the hull of the ship. This attraction acts much stronger on the smaller displacement vessel, which can lose control. In modern textbooks on ship handling, it is stated that a smaller vessel should overtake a larger one.
Enemy force sighted on the horizon.
From today's perspective, the captain of the cruiser hull was blamed for the collision, as he attempted a risky
Smoke generator started.
larger ship. However, in the early 20th century, this phenomenon was no longer understood. In 1912,
Spotted an enemy submarine.
the commanders and the captain, Robert James Hannon, Captain Edward Smith,
Screen set.
night of April 15, the radio operator received a distress message that the Titanic was damaged. Without realizing the full extent of the tragedy, the radio operator tried to determine whether the Olympic should assist the Titanic or continue its destination. The response received was, "We are putting the women in the boat." The radio operator informed them that the Olympic was steaming at full speed to hell. However, it was too far away from its sister ship. When the Olympic arrived in Southampton, the city was flooding. In August 1914, the Olympic was taken out of commercial service due to the outbreak of World War I. Captain Bertram Parsons took over, and the ship was equipped with artillery. From then on, the Olympic operated as a
Enemy
military
destroyer
vessel
blown
under
up.
the designation to administer Minus 10. On October 1, 1915, the Olympic transported 6,000 troops to Lemnos, Greece. The crew noticed lifeboats from the sunken French ship Propeller. The captain of the Olympic ordered the ship to stop immediately and pick up the survivors. Survivors were offered a gold medal by France in recognition of the rescue. Britain had a different opinion. They accused the captain of the Olympic of negligently stopping in dangerous waters and risking the lives of 6,000 soldiers on one of its voyages. One of its voyages, was a British water, which were considered a danger zone, was accompanied by 4 American cruisers. Unexpectedly, we noticed a German submarine on the surface of the water to the starboard side of the Olympic. The crew of the ship expected to be torpedoed by the German submarine any moment, but miraculously, the submarine did not notice the massive liner. At that moment, the captain of the Olympic ordered the submarine to be fired upon. The target was so close that it was impossible to press the gun sufficiently to destroy the enemy. The shells passed just above the German. It was only at the moment that they saw the giant ship. The commander of the German submarine immediately ordered it to dive. In this situation, the only way to attempt to hide from the attacking ship. However, it was too late. The Olympic overtook the submarine at full speed, rammed it with its 46,000 blade, splitting the submarine in half, causing it to quickly sink. The captain of the Olympic asked the American escort ships to pick up the surviving German sailors. 31 people were rescued. The Olympic itself suffered minor damage, which was almost imperceptible above the water's surface. The bow was bent after the collision. After World War I, the Olympic organization was converted into an oil-burning vessel, and the coal bunkers were removed to make way for liquid fuel tanks. This significantly reduced refueling time. Additionally, coal dust was no longer a discomfort for passengers. The crew of the Olympic was reduced from 360 to 60 members. On November 18, 1929, a very strange incident occurred with the Olympic during a voyage to New York. Suddenly, the ship began to shake violently. The crew could not understand what had happened, as there were no other ships nearby that they could collide with, and the engines were working properly. The loss of the propeller blade was ruled out. The true shock for the crew was the fact that during the strong vibration, the Olympic happened to be at the exact location where the Titanic had sunk nearly 2 days The Titanic sank in the same place where the Olympic was at the time. Later, this phenomenon was explained by an underwater earthquake in 1934. In May of that year, Captain John Binks took over the command of the Olympic. In May of that year, a tragedy occurred. The Olympic was in the waters of New York.
Smoke generator started.
The ship's crew spotted a floating buoy activate. Captain John Binks ordered the engines to reverse. But there was no time for maneuvering. The giant ship collided with the floating buoy, resulting in the death of 7 people. Some managed to
Smoke
survive.
screen set.
Despite its reputation as a reliable ocean liner, the Olympic rapidly aged against the backdrop of the Great Depression and the emergence of new generation liners. The company did not find enough funds for a major overhaul and modernization of the Olympic. After preparations began for the creation of the transatlantic liner, the Queen Mary, the Olympic was considered obsolete. The Olympic spent over 5 months to scrap alongside its former rival. All its interior fittings were sold at auction. By the end of 1977, the dismantling and disposal of the ship had completed. The chief engineer of the liner
Enemy
noted
cruiser
that its engines
destroyed.
remained in working order.
Torpedoes to starboard.
The Olympic completed 257
Torpedoes to starboard.
transatlantic voyages, carried 420,000 passengers, and traveled more than 1 million nautical miles.
Victory is in sight. Main turret critically damaged.